Hello, welcome to REYT, the independent Sheffield podcast powered by Sheffield Forum for everything Sheffield. I'm James Hargreaves, and today I'm going to be joined by Dan Hayes, journalist, founder and editor of the Sheffield Tribune. The reader-funded digital newspaper has been holding Sheffield to account since 2021. In this episode, we get into Dan's background, how he ended up trading a career at the Star for a one-man email newsletter, and what happened next. We talk about the people behind the Tribune's biggest stories, the controversial ones too, including what the Leadmill actually thought of the Tribune's coverage of their fight to stay in their building. And we get into the Andrew Milne leasehold saga, an investigation that's just landed the Tribune on the shortlist for Private Eye's prestigious Paul Foot Award, one of the most respected prizes in British journalism. And because this is REYT, Dan also sums up Sheffield from the perspective of someone who chose to come here and has never looked back. Plus his rate good recommendations for the best the city has to offer. And one more thing before we get into it. The Tribune is currently celebrating its 5th birthday with a drive to add 1,000 new members. So for a limited time, you can try the full Tribune experience, including the members-only reporting, for whatever you want to pay, including absolutely nothing. So if you've never read it, now's the time. Head to sheffieldtribune.co.uk/pledge to find out more. And let's get into the conversation. This is my conversation with Dan Hayes. Five years ago, Sheffield Star reporter handed in his notice. He started a little newspaper and asked Sheffield to fund it. Today, the Sheffield Tribune has over 40,000 readers and lots of subscribers. It's shortlisted for Private Eye's Paul Foot Award and is currently having a birthday celebration. Today's guest is Dan Hayes. Welcome, Dan.
Okay, thanks for having me.
So, Dan, for anybody that doesn't know who you are, or what you do, or what the Tribune is, can you just give us a quick overview?
Yeah, so I'm Dan Hayes. I'm the founder of the Sheffield Tribune, which is a newish, I suppose, newsletter and newspaper for Sheffield, which is sent out to about 40,000 readers every week by email. Yeah, so I set it up, as James said. I left the Star in 2021 and to set up the Sheffield Tribune. And yeah, we're just about to celebrate our 5th birthday.
I guess people might be hearing your accent and hearing a little twinge that's not quite Sheffield.
Please don't hold it against me.
I don't think anyone will. But yeah, I think you had an interesting journey into journalism, didn't you? It wasn't your first kind of calling.
No. When I did a politics degree, and then kind of fell into a job working in local government for quite a while. It's like 13 years. Journalism was something I was always interested in, but I just kind of never kind of seemed to make it happen. But the previous job I was in, they were offering voluntary redundancies in the kind of early 2010s. And eventually in 2014, I took it with the money. I didn't get a huge amount of money, but I got sort of redundancy payment. And it was either kind of go and travel the world or go and train to do something else. Sometimes I think, I could still be on a beach by now if I'd have taken traveling the world. I actually moved to Sheffield and did a short journalism course at Sheffield College and ended up after that getting a job at the Derbyshire Times in Chesterfield. And then in 2018, coming back to work at the Star, working there for 3 years and then setting up the Tribune. So it might be nice to have traveled the world, but I'm glad I did what I did because, it's something that I think I'm okay at, and it seems to have gone quite well, and the Tribune's doing it well, so I think I made the right decision.
Yeah, I think so. You grew up in Bolton, you studied in Leeds, I believe, did you?
Yeah, and then I went to university in Leeds, but yeah, I'm from Bolton, so yeah, I feel coming in the past, I suppose, moving from Lancashire to Yorkshire would have been a big thing. I think it's less of a thing now. I think people are a bit less, obviously people travel around a lot more, but still some people in Sheffield are a bit like, they can pick my accents and they say, you're from Lancashire, you aren't you? I think, it's just a bit of banter and I quite like it, to be honest.
Yeah. So you did your journalism degree in Sheffield.
It was actually a short form course at Sheffield College. So
right.
they Sheffield College offer these kind of short 22-week courses. And so I did one of those instead.
Right. So was it literally just going into the job that you were offered a job in Chesterfield and then Sheffield? Is that what made you stick to Sheffield, or is there anything else that made you stick here?
Yeah, no, I when I first came here in 2014, I was working hard on the journalism course, but yeah, I really, really enjoyed being in the city. I suppose one of the things I really enjoy is, when I was living back home, I used to spend a lot of time in the Lake District. in Sheffield, you've got a national park, which is not just kind of on the doorstep, but it's like it overlaps with the city. So it is from Bolton to the Lake District. It would take me like an hour and a half in the car. Whereas here, you can spend 5 minutes in the car. You can be in the Peak District. You're actually, it's one of the really unique things about Sheffield, and one of the greatest things about it is that you've got such a brilliant access to such amazing countryside. And so, yeah, I can. That's one of the reasons I wanted to stick around. Obviously, Chesterfield is similar because Chesterfield is very near the Peak District itself. And so, yeah, and I suppose you also follow jobs as well. So, the job in Chesterfield came up and the job in Sheffield came up. So I followed those, but I was keen to stay in Sheffield because, as anyone who's come here, can realise it is quite a special place, and it's kind of a bit of a hidden gem, really, because it's, it kind of shouts a little bit less loudly than Manchester and Leeds, but a lot of people who come here stay here, and because they really love it.
And is that something that drives you in your journalism and your reporting and your team in shouting about Sheffield and trying to get the good things out?
Yeah, definitely. I suppose when I first started the Tribune, it was like, obviously a lot of news is by its nature kind of bad news, that's just the way it is. But when I was looking at the Star, it felt like kind of the only reason that you would ever go to certain parts of Sheffield is if something's kicked off. There's been some kind of violent crime or murder or something like that. And there's so much brilliant that's going on in the city. And obviously, being a newspaper, we're never going to shy away from the bad stuff. But I also wanted to celebrate the good stuff as well. And there's so much good stuff going on in Sheffield. Some of my colleagues joke that we feel a bit, we don't want to tell people because we want it to be kind of our secret. We don't want loads of people coming here and bring it, like raising the house prices or something like that, because if more people knew about it, many more people would want to come and live here, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. Looking into some of your bylines before, didn't you once, just whilst working for the Star, I believe you went to one story, and then as you were there was some kind of drugs bust or something going on? Is that right?
Yeah, there's a lot of things like that. And the funniest one was Prince Harry was EIS in Attercliffe. Right. So I went to a royal visit in the morning, and then just as I was leaving, the office called and said, "Oh, can you go to Upperthorpe? There's been a murder." You know what I mean? So it's like, this is kind of the nature of being a local news reporter. It's like literally anything and everything comes your way. And yeah, it's very varied and very interesting. But I suppose what we do with the Tribune, with the Star, you would just go to the incident in question and you would write a very short piece about it. Whereas now with the Tribune, we get a chance to dig a bit deeper about these things. So we did a piece recently about a gang operating in Upperthorpe, and that kind of delved a bit deeper into kind of what was going on in Upperthorpe, because obviously anyone who lives in Sheffield knows that sometimes things go on in Upperthorpe, and the Tribune gives us the opportunity to kind of delve a bit deeper into these stories and actually find out what's going on rather than just reporting the facts.
I think that's a good marker of the Tribune, is that you might read a story on the Star or Yorkshire Live or any of the other multiple news outlets, but it's kind of like just a glossing over, whereas I look forward to receiving the Tribune because then I get the more in-depth kind of analysis of it, and I kind of like, I read a story and I'm like, I know that the Tribune's going to go out and speak to people there and get, I don't know, journalists always try and find their angle or their line or whatever, don't they? But do you think that that's something that wider journalism's generally missing nowadays?
Yeah. I don't want to, I used to work at the Star, and I don't want to like criticize other journalists at all, but they are, I think, working in a system in which prioritizes them getting lots of stories out as quickly as they possibly can. And what we do is the opposite. We kind of try and slow down. We try and send fewer things out, but make the things we do send out better. And that not only works for readers, readers get something better to read and actually understand what's going on. It's better for me as a writer because I can spend time with stories. Sometimes at the Star, and this isn't just the Star, I don't want to be talking about the Star, but like sometimes with lots of other local newspapers, journalists can be spending like as little as maybe 20 minutes or half an hour on a story. Yeah. Whereas now, I very rarely spend less than, say, 2 days on it. Some of my colleagues spend a lot longer. For example, my colleague Victoria in 2023 spent 6 months researching a story about the Leadmill. Yeah. Journalists in local newspapers just do not get the time to do that anymore. And that's kind of the unique thing that the Tribune and the company that we're part of offers journalists, gives them a chance to really investigate stuff. And it produces, brilliant things that that Leadmill piece completely changed the conversation around the Leadmill in Sheffield.
Yeah. Absolutely. I think you're right. It did. I watched that happening in real time, and we had a topic on Sheffield Forum about it as well, which was quite popular. And at the start, it was lots of people were very sympathetic to Leadmill.
Yeah.
And then as it went on and through some of your reporting and other things happening, I think the sentiment kind of really changed, didn't it? Really, the balance of the sentiment really changed. I know a lot of people at the Leadmill. I feel really sorry for what happened there, but I think the public perception of it really did kind of take a turn at one point.
It's a fascinating story what's happened at the Leadmill. But from its inception in the early 80s and how it changed from being this really idealistic kind of community-focused venue into just being any other venue run for profit. I can understand why the previous owners of the Leadmill were disappointed and angry about Dominic Madden for coming along, but for them to claim that they were kind of defending the soul of Sheffield by saying that Madden shouldn't be allowed to buy it felt disingenuous to a lot of the people we were speaking to.
And I think that bore out in your comments as well, which is another aspect of the Tribune, which, similar to Sheffield Forum, you give people kind of like the opportunity to delve into the story themselves and discuss it. And you guys also jump on the comments and reply to feedback or opinion or whatever. Yeah.
I mean, we were just talking before we started recording about what Facebook comments are like on lots of other local newspapers, or, for example, things like Sheffield Online. They're not a nice place to be. They're full of lots of people arguing, calling each other names, they're talking, saying really, really unpleasant things. Whereas our comments are, it's just kind of it's a revelation. Having come from an area, a place where Facebook comments should come with a 18 certificate, Tribune comments. I'm not saying that there isn't debate, there is, but people actually are respectful and they'll produce an argument. Sometimes people write 500 words in the comment, and we'll get people there's a guy called Robin Hughes who's a heritage expert, and he comments, and he'll bring a completely different aspect to it, a different angle to it, and it's just really, really interesting to have all these experts talking to each other in our comments. And it's been a revelation for me, coming from a very different environment.
The kind of thing that I've noticed with the comments on there, and as opposed to, say, Facebook comments or Twitter or whatever, is people are reading beyond the headline.
Yeah.
It's a lot of headlines are written to entice the click, aren't they?
Of course.
Just clickbait, and it doesn't necessarily give you the full facts of the story. Whereas your readers read through the whole thing and have an informed view.
Yeah.
And that's where it bears out as a nicer piece of discussion.
Yeah. I mean, we've had lots of comments in the past about people saying the Tribune has got them back into reading longer form journalism, because I'm the same. Sometimes I can go online and go on the BBC website or whatever website, and you can, you'll just read the headline in the first two paragraphs, and you're not really getting very much from that, Whereas people say that when they read the Tribune, they read it from start to finish, and they actually get something out of it, which makes me feel good as having kind of contributed to it, and gives them something that's interesting and informative, and it's just a good feeling all around, rather than just kind of pandering to kind of people's very short attention spans these days.
Yeah, which I think is a massive problem, especially with the younger people, isn't it? Is that a challenge for you, getting younger people to read your long form pieces?
Yeah, I think so. I was probably the same. When I was in my teens and 20s, I probably wasn't reading long form journalism either. Not many people are, but there are some. But I think most of our readers probably are. I think when we started, there were a lot of kind of, say, people over 50 or kind of retirees. Now we've kind of made that a bit younger. We've got a lot of people in their 30s and 40s, but I think maybe teens and 20s is something we still have to work on. And maybe we can look to kind of change what we do in future, possibly more podcasting, possibly more videos, to try and kind of change kind of the kind of stuff we put out to make it appeal to a younger audience. Obviously, a lot of young people are just getting the news and stuff like that from TikTok and YouTube these days. So, you've got to kind of do what they want to do. If you want to attract those users, you've got to do what they want to do. You've got to do things the way that they want to consume it.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's kind of been the ethos of Sheffield Forum in the last couple of years. Is it's an ecosystem now. It's not just a website on its own. It's an ecosystem of we're trying to publish more on YouTube, Facebook, TikTok, things like that. Is as a small, I'm a one-man band, but you're a small team. It's very difficult to find the time to do that, because it's a lot of work to put that kind of stuff together, isn't it?
Yeah.
But go where the audience is.
Definitely, yeah. And, hopefully in time, we've got 4 members of staff now, and hopefully we can grow that. And maybe one day we'll have a member of staff who just looks at video. Well, who knows? But that's something for the future, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. So one of the features that we do is imagining that you are essentially meeting somebody for the first time who's never heard of Sheffield. And this feature is called Sum Up Sheffield. So, Dan, how would you sum up Sheffield? What is Sheffield to you? What does it mean?
When I was thinking about how to answer this question, I was thinking the 3 words that kind of sprung to mind were kind of friendly, humble, and hilly. So, like, friendly is, I'm a northerner, and northerners are meant to be friendlier than southerners, aren't they? But I think when the first weekend I arrived in Sheffield, I lived in Pittsmoor at the time. I was lodging with somebody in Pittsmoor, and I got the bus down from Pittsmoor to the city centre so I could go and watch football in the city centre. And some people just kind of engaged me in conversation in the upper deck of a bus, and I was surprised by that. I'm like I say, I'm a northerner, and northerners are friendly, but I don't think that would have happened back home in Bolton. People just kind of engaged me in conversation, and yeah, I had a nice chat with people and said it was my first weekend in the city. Where should I go? What should I see? That kind of thing. So that was nice. I know it's a cliche, but people say it's the world's biggest village, that kind of thing. But it does feel like that. It's a big city, but it does have a kind of a feel of a smaller place that is kind of quite friendly, where a lot of people know each other, and I quite like that.
Yeah.
Humble was, my colleague Victoria, she, in a piece that she wrote a while ago, she said that Sheffield has a near pathological humility, right? which kind of is obviously quite funny. And I think it's true. Sheffield has a hell of a lot going for it in terms of its kind of environment, in terms of its musical history, in terms of its kind of heritage and history. But it doesn't tend to kind of broadcast that very much.
Yeah.
Certainly, Bolton's near Manchester, and Manchester kind of does the opposite. Manchester can't stop talking about itself, whereas Sheffield is a very different place. Yeah, and that's it's kind of endearing that it doesn't want to kind of constantly talk about itself. But I think it probably should, because there's a hell of a lot going for it. And the final one, is hilly. When I first came to Sheffield, that first kind of few weeks, I couldn't get my head around just how hilly it was. If you go to the train station, literally you head off in any direction, you're heading up a massive hill. And for the first few weeks, I couldn't get over how kind of out of breath I was. But it actually it's quite good, because it makes you fitter. But also, as I've lived here for longer, you realise that it produces a kind of you get incredible views all over the city, like from places like Maresbrook Park, Norfolk Park, Sky Edge, and Parkwood Springs and places like that. And so it produces a really interesting city visually. And once I've got used to the kind of it tiring me out a bit, I really like that.
Yeah, and you kind of almost famously in the Tribune comments, you live at Park Hill.
I do.
So you see those hills every day, don't you? Walking to Leah's Yard or whatever.
Yeah, I'm very, very lucky. I live on the top floor of Park Hill, and we got, obviously, for anyone who's seen it, we got the big windows and the views out. I can see over to Parkwood Springs, I can see over to the Peak District. I can see the entire city centre in front of me, and I'm very, very lucky to live there.
Yeah, and you speak about the humility and the friendliness of Sheffield. Do you think the friendliness kind of works into that humility because people are so fond and friendly of each other to try and keep it inside Sheffield as such?
Yeah. We've done quite a few pieces about that idea about it being quite. It's a little bit separate from other places. It feels it because it's not particularly well connected, like transport wise. We're not that well connected to Manchester. You got to go over Snake Pass basically, or Woodhead Pass, and we're not on like kind of a lot of the trains that come up from London go straight into Leeds. So it feels like it's kind of a bit separated off from the rest of the country in a way, and that's kind of produced lots of interesting things like. For example, last week we had a piece by Daniel Dillon-Ray, the music journalist, about how Sheffield music has developed in a very unique way. We've had pieces in the past about how its food scene has developed in a unique way. A lot of the bigger restaurants that are in Manchester and Leeds don't have restaurants here, and it's meant that the restaurant offer here is a bit different and a bit unique. Sheffield feels like quite a different place than those places, and we did a piece last year about speaking to somebody from Manchester about who's originally from Sheffield, and he says what Sheffield has, it should try and keep hold of what it is. It shouldn't try and emulate Manchester and Leeds. It should try and keep hold of the uniqueness that it has, and to try and kind of emphasise that and sell itself on that, because that's really special.
Yeah, I think so. And do you think, have you observed kind of over the last 5 years or even longer that you've been in Sheffield, do you think that Sheffield has started selling itself more? And do you think it's getting out there a bit more?
I think so, yeah. I mean, like you say, we work at Lear's Yard, and there's a lot of positive things going on in the city centre, and I think the council and the combined authority are very, very keen to sell Sheffield to the outside world a bit more because, for example, like Manchester and Leeds, they will attract people from a wider area, whereas we maybe attract people to Sheffield less well. So I think there's definitely an attempt to try and sell Sheffield a bit better. But yeah, it's kind of funny because, how do you, trying to market Sheffield? There's a bit in Sheffield, I think, that feels like, well, if you don't like it, we're not going to sell it to you. That kind of thing. There's a bit of a stubbornness. If you don't like it, it's fair enough, stay away. Whereas, which is nice, but I think it could maybe do to get over that a bit.
I think it's something I've observed for kind of like as long as I remember almost, but Sheffield has that village feel and people love that and they love all the independence and they love, we have places like Lear's Yard and independent businesses and creators and communities and things like the Tribune. But on the opposite hand, they also aspire to be like every other city. It's like, why doesn't we have the Harvey Nichols? Why has John Lewis left Sheffield and things like that? It kind of like it contradicts itself in some respects. Do you feel that as well?
Yeah. I'm slightly worried about saying this as an outsider, but sometimes it feels like some people in Sheffield you speak to about, say, for example, Leeds, have a bit of a chip on the shoulder about Leeds. You know what I mean? Like, it's like, grumble that, Leeds always gets everything. You know what I mean? That kind of thing. Leeds got Channel 4. Leeds still has a Harvey Nicks and a John Lewis, which, I can understand. But like I say, I don't think we want to be like Leeds and Manchester. But to have a few more of those things would be great, definitely.
Going back to your reporting then, you mentioned the Leadmill there, and obviously the people at the Leadmill were kind of not best pleased with some of your reporting on it, I guess. And you've done a few pieces similar, like, I don't know, highlighting Hallam University's troubles at the minute and things like that. How do you balance that as an editor and a journalist, that you might be having to be slightly negative about an institution in Sheffield with kind of like the aspiration as well of sharing good news? What's the...
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the great things about the Tribune is that because we do longer form journalism, we can actually get into kind of the nuance of a story. So, for example, my colleagues Victoria and Molly recently did something about the showroom. And we'd been contacted by several members of staff saying things weren't that great at the showroom. But I think that piece was very fair to what was going on at the showroom, and it kind of it explained what was going on in a very fair way to the people who were managing it and everyone who was involved in it. But I don't think it was. I understand what you're saying. Sometimes things can come across like a hatchet job, and we really wouldn't want that to happen. Whenever we do a story, we want to be fair to the people we're writing about. I think in the Leadmill piece, we were fair to them. Those kind of organisations, those kind of arts organisations are incredibly difficult to run, I think. Difficult to kind of turn into kind of a profit-making or not loss-making institutions, you know what I mean? So I think, the fact that we can go longer allows us to explain things in a bit more depth. I'd be really disappointed if people thought that we were doing things just to kind of slag things off, because that's absolutely not what we want to do. We want to kind of big things up like the showroom, because I think the showroom's a great thing, but obviously it's an organisation that's facing problems. I like the Leadmill, but the story there was that the people who had been involved in it setting it up were unhappy about the way that this campaign to save it was being sold. So yeah, I just think we try and get as deep as we possibly can and explain things with as much nuance as we possibly can, and just try and be fair to people. But yeah, criticising big cultural organisations in Sheffield is not easy. You inevitably are going to annoy some people, and we have annoyed some people. Yeah, and I don't like doing that, because I like being liked. I like people liking the Tribune. I like people liking me. But sometimes you can't please everybody all the time, unfortunately. A good piece of journalism is balanced and gives the people who might be the targets of any allegations or any criticism, gives them a fair opportunity to put their side of the story forward. And we always do that.
Have you had pushback from any of these organisations that you've covered? Anyone seriously got in touch and and had a go.
Yeah, I mean, like sometimes our stuff about the Leadmill attracts some criticism to say that we've been too hard on the previous owners and too easy on the new owners, but I don't think that's true at all. We've also, the people we've written stories about have been in touch numerous times to threaten to sue. We've never actually been sued yet, so I think a lot of people maybe threaten to sue because they think you're going to back down, but then when you don't, they don't really follow through with it. But it's a scary thing when someone sends you a letter or an email saying they're going to sue you, because if we did get it wrong and we were sued for a lot of money, it could mean the end of the Tribune. So we've got to be very, very careful. We do have like lawyers we use to legal our stories.
Yeah,
but it's still quite a worrying. A worrying thing to happen whenever it does. But I think also it means that you're doing good journalism as well, because kind of exposing wrongdoing and kind of holding the powerful to account is kind of one of the points of what journalism is, really.
I've noticed a couple of times reading the Tribune that you've mentioned that there's a story kind of like just going through some legal checks or whatever before publishing, and I believe that there was an article that you published on behalf of Mill Media as a whole a couple of weeks ago, in the very threat of legal action from different places. Is that a constant risk that you're running? Because, like you say, that could essentially bring the whole thing down and stop you doing your jobs.
Yeah. No, it is definitely. I know of our boss, Yoshi, who set up the mill in 2020. I don't think he likes spending lots of money on lawyers because they're expensive, but he also thinks that you kind of have to if you want to defend your reporting. Fortunately for us, he does back his reporters, and the case that you're mentioning, one at our sister title in London, they've just found out that they've won that case.
Yeah,
but they have spent tens of thousands of pounds on lawyers, so that's possibly a reason why I haven't got a pay rise this year. So it kind of does, even if we win, it does affect us all, because it means that there's less money to spend on the journalism. So, yeah, it's not something that we want to happen, but I think it kind of goes with the territory if you're going to do things that expose wrongdoing and expose powerful people, because sadly, the way our legal system works in this country, those powerful people feel like that they can use the legal system to kind of bully journalists into not reporting. And what you need to do is not cave, and you need to stand up to that.
That's a very important thing to do. As you say there, the direct link to wages and things like that. I think
it was a bit of a joke, but I think there's some truth in it.
There is, and my point to that is that I think you've been very forthright in a lot of your updates, and especially call for subscriptions, and that it's not necessarily to make loads and loads of money, not necessarily at this stage, but you want to expand your team.
Yeah.
And that's what's enabled you to bring on the likes of Victoria and Molly.
Yeah.
So I guess my point is that is the call to action, isn't it? That it's for people to subscribe to support this long form journalism.
Yeah. When we first started, we didn't really give it the hard sell that much. I don't really like giving it the hard sell, because it's not something that comes naturally to me. Give us your money, kind of Bob Geldof style, like Live Aid, But like, you need to do it. You need to get people to understand that unless they pay for this, it won't survive. And it's certainly not like you're saying we don't want to make loads of money. I mean, the Tribune is never ever going to be something that makes loads of money, because the point for us is to create something that's sustainable, something that can last. Because sadly, typical local papers aren't sustainable in the long run. So we wanted to create a model of local journalism that can sustain itself. But in order to do that, we need to get people to pay. And we've currently got like 3,200 people to pay. And then that can support a team of 3 and a bit people or 4 people. What we'd like to get to is a team of maybe half a dozen or more. But in order to do that, we'd need, to get another few thousand members, because that's the way that we grow. We're trying to build something from the bottom up, and we will only hire new members of staff if we've got the money coming in from members in order to do that.
People like us are not necessarily natural salespeople.
I'm certainly not, no.
But it's come across well in some of your editorial pieces, where you've explained just outright that an X amount more subscribers will equal another reporter to do more.
Yeah,
What does your team look like long term? There's the 4 of you essentially now, isn't there?
Yeah, well, yeah, it's kind of 3 full-time and 1 Daniel who kind of has a role across the entire group. So he spends a lot of his time working on the Tribune, but he spends a lot of his time working on our other titles as well. So he's currently launching something in Leeds as well. We've just started a title in Leeds. So we have 3 and a bit members of staff essentially at the moment. But yeah, I think the idea would be to try and get maybe even half a dozen or a few more. We'd like to have, say, for example, maybe a dedicated politics reporter at one point. We're not there yet, but it would be really good because in the past, Sheffield had probably several dedicated politics reporters. I know I once went to cover one of the Brexit debates, and there was in the press room, there was a sign on the wall that said Sheffield Star. This is where the Sheffield Star reporter sits.
Right.
So the Sheffield Star used to have a dedicated Westminster reporter who used to go down to Parliament, to spend in Parliament. And, that seems like mad to me now, that the Sheffield Star would have a parliamentary report, but they did. So it would be great to have a full-time politics reporter. It would be great to have a full-time culture writer as well, someone who's dedicated to covering music and theatre and art from Sheffield. Because, in the past, the Sheffield Telegraph had these people, and they had, I know Martin Dawes, who used to do food reviews for the Sheffield Star. I kind of know him reasonably well. I did a story with him last year or the year before. We kind of reviewed a restaurant called Norse together, and he's just such a brilliant character. And for 20 or 25 years, he was the Star's restaurant correspondent. And he said he kind of regaled me with his stories about how many restaurants he's shut down in that time, by giving them a bad review, how many restaurants he'd been banned from for giving them a bad review. He's just such a fantastic character. And Sheffield had these people in the past, and I don't really see any reason why it shouldn't again. If we got a good food reviewer, for example, that person could be a really kind of significant figure in the city and kind of selling Sheffield's food offer, like we were saying earlier, to outside the city, and really informing people about what was going on in all the different restaurants and places you could get something to eat in the city. And we had it before. Why can't we have it again?
Yeah, and one of the pieces I read kind of in preparation for this was when you very first started your subscription model and calling for subscriptions back in 21. There was a piece that you wrote about the rise and fall of Sheffield journalism.
Yeah.
And I was like, I kind of knew in the back of my head, but I was shocked that newspapers back in the day used to have 200 staff and things like that.
I mean, the Star's office at York Street, we were told that, you would walk on the newsroom and a newsroom would be full of hundreds of people, all tapping away on the typewriters, the smoke hanging heavy in the air because everyone was smoking. I mean, it's a different world, isn't it? A completely different world. But that's what it was like, because newspapers were lucrative. It was a big money-making thing, because if you wanted to advertise anything in the past, you would get in touch with the Star. Now, since the internet became a thing in sort of early 2000s, people go to eBay and Gumtree and all those things. And I had a paper round when I was in Bolton when I was a kid. The Bolton News on a Wednesday was half an inch thick for property pages. All that went to Rightmove and Zoopla and all those places. So the business model of local newspapers over the last 25 years has disappeared. So that's why newspapers are finding it really difficult to fund themselves. So into that breach, kind of, we thought what you need to do is you need to create a subscription model, and it seems to be working at the moment.
You've just unlocked a memory there where the Sheffield Star was the Thursday was the jobs page, and that was thick with you finding a job is going through circling. I think it was Tuesday was the property pull out in the Telegraph. So that's really unlocked a memory. But talking about your team, it's not just your team that are internal and full time. I think you give a lot of opportunities to other writers to have their own bylines and do their own work and pitch stories.
I mean, some of that was necessity, really, because when we first started the Tribune, for the first 2 years, it was just me. So I needed some help in terms of freelance reporting to help me. Unfortunately, we managed to get in touch with a few reporters. I suppose the main one who's been working with us longest is a guy called David Bocking, who many people will know. He used to work at the Telegraph for a long time, and now he runs his own website, but he also contributes kind of monthly pieces to us, and he is kind of probably the preeminent expert on the environment and nature and active travel in Sheffield. So to get him contributing regularly for us is fantastic. And We know that readers really, really love his pieces. He's written, just this year, he's written things about kind of Sheffield seagulls, which doesn't sound necessarily like the most interesting thing in the world, but Sheffield has a lot of seagulls living in the kind of lower Don Valley, because during the winter, they all like to come here and sit on the roofs of the factories so they can keep warm. It's just those little details, talking about things like, great crested newts. There was one a few weeks ago. There's over in kind of like East Sheffield, like Bayton and that kind of area. There's these ponds where these kind of really kind of rare great crested newts live. And Sheffield. When I first started the Tribune, I knew that Sheffield has a really strong connection to its natural environment. So I knew that there were lots of people out there who would really be interested in what David was doing. And they are. People love his stuff. And Sheffield's, more than any of our other titles anywhere in the country, really reacts to kind of environmental stories, presumably because of its proximity to the Peak District and its beautiful natural environment.
Yeah, I've worked with David Bucking before, and when I worked at the Wildlife Trust, he was kind of a godsend to us at the Wildlife Trust, because obviously we did lots of, and they still do, lots of fantastic work, but getting the word out on that work is really hard. And to have someone dedicated to doing that thing.
Yeah.
And he's got his own kind of Tribune adjacent kind of thing, hasn't he? A bit Black Over Bill's Mothers.
Yeah.
Which is a fantastic read. I read that all the time as well.
Yeah.
And he always does find that interesting angle.
He does. And one thing you might not know about David is I was absolutely astonished last year when I found it out that he was in the 80s. He was in a band with Jarvis Cocker.
Yeah.
Yeah, he was in a band called Heroes of the Beach. And some of the early photos of Pulp, he took them. He says he occasionally bumps into Jarvis and says hello, and they chat about old times. But, I had no idea about it until last year. So he's full of hidden depths, does David.
Yeah, and he's... He's a very good advocate for adopting as well.
Oh yeah, you wrote something for us about adopting and fostering. Yeah, it was one of our most popular pieces, and I would urge anybody who wants to find out about what fostering's really like to Google that and find the piece that he wrote for us, because it's absolutely brilliant.
Yeah. So how many stories is it you publish a week now? Is it 3,
4?
3, 4?
Yeah.
So where do you see that going? Do you envisage doing a story a day? Well, a publication a day, because it's not just one story necessarily.
Yeah. Possibly in future, yeah. I mean, I suppose when we first started, felt right for kind of the size of team we had. Now we've got a bigger team. Maybe we could do to increase that. But I suppose we do hear from some of our readers saying that they're kind of happy with the amount that we're putting out at the moment, because sometimes they don't want too much, because they don't want to some people get behind on them, they say. Yeah. So when they get them in their emails, they'll save them into a folder, and then they'll try and catch up with them all in one go. Because, finding, 15, 20 minutes to read a long read is difficult these days, isn't it? Yeah. People have got incredibly busy lives, and not everybody's got that kind of amount of time to kind of devote to kind of a lot of sitting down and reading something on your phone. So yeah, we wouldn't want to kind of ever bombard people, but yeah, we could possibly look to send out a little bit more than that, and maybe change it up a bit with a few shorter stories and a few longer stories. Yeah, 4 a week just felt like the right amount for what we had at the time. But yeah, that's possibly subject to change in the future, I think.
Yeah, going back to other publications, like they can churn out like 200-300 stories a day, can't they?
Yeah.
I think there's. Just going back to, not to criticise the Star or anything, but going back to your time at the Star, there's a really funny story that I read where you were asked to do a marmalade sandwich story.
Yeah.
Was that the catalyst to you eventually leaving?
Yeah, I mean, it was certainly one of them. That happened in the kind of 6 months before I left, and the story is that on BBC Breakfast they were talking about the condiment that they had on a sausage sandwich, and Dan Walker, it was the presenter at the time, and obviously Dan Walker is a Sheffield figure. And it turned out that they were talking about this, what condiment they had. Some people said tomato sauce, and some people said brown sauce. And the weather woman, I can't remember what she's called, Louise Minchin, I think, she said she had marmalade on a sausage sandwich, which I acknowledge is slightly weird. Right? Putting marmalade on a sausage sandwich feels weird to me anyway. But every newspaper around the country did a story on it. And I kind of was like, laughing at these other newspapers doing the story. And later on that morning, I was asked to do a story about the sausage sandwich with marmalade on it, and focused heavily on Dan Walker because obviously he's a Sheffield figure. So yeah, it felt like that wasn't the kind of thing that I wanted to be doing when I went into journalism. When you go into journalism, I've always loved All the President's Men, about, the Watergate and how the kind of these two young journalists brought the president down, and, doing things about a sausage sandwich because it felt like a disappointment. And it's not something that I wanted to carry on doing. Unfortunately, the Tribune gave me a way out of doing that. And we don't do stories about what breakfast TV presenters like on their sausage sandwiches anymore.
I really wanted to know as well. But do you think now the kind of success of the Tribune and the other Mill titles, it's kind of vindicated the long read and the quality investigative journalism that you're doing?
Definitely, yeah. I mean, when Yoshi Herman, who set up the Mill in 2020, when he set it up, there were lots and lots of people around the local news industry that said it will never work. People will not pay for local news. And I don't want to crow over it. I don't want to kind of, say I told you so, but they were wrong. People will. If you give them a product that is good enough, people will. Not like the Star in the past and the Manchester Evening News and all these titles, they used to be read by hundreds and hundreds of thousands of people. And, hundreds of thousands of people bought it every day. Now, we're not there, but the Mill has got 4,500 members. We've got 3,200. Across the entire group, we're on about 15,000. So people will pay for local news, and we've got 25 staff working now. And in the future, there's no reason why that can't double in size. People will pay for local news if you give them a product that's good enough. It won't be like the glory days of local news, but it'll be something different. And, we feel really kind of proud that we've kind of created something that people want and has given, the local news industry has been a bit down in the dumps for the last 20, 25 years. And we are a good news story in local news, which are quite rare to find.
Yeah, I think I mentioned to you before we recorded, I read a piece about the Times who've done a quality strategy review and essentially cut down the amount of stories by 25% whilst keeping the staff and allowing them to do more of what you're doing to some extent. And they've found that their readership's gone up by 30% or so.
No, I think one of the ideas that was a founding idea for the whole company was nowadays the problem isn't too much. The problem isn't too little news. The problem is too much. You know what I mean? We're constantly bombarded by news coming, Facebook, Twitter, all the different types. There's too much of it. The Tribune does the opposite. It slows down. But we can actually vouch for everything that's sent out by the Tribune is worth a read, and it will inform you or entertain you or provide some insight into something that's going on in Sheffield. We don't try and trick people into reading stories that promise something really exciting from the headline and then don't deliver. Everything that we send out, we can say hand on heart, it's worth reading. That people trust that, and it's created a really kind of strong relationship between us and our readers, which if you can get a relationship of trust between you and your readers, that is kind of gold. If you can create a trusting relationship, that is something that any business really wants, isn't it, I think?
So heading into our second feature now, I think you've almost touched on one part of it with the Sheffield Star seat in Parliament.
Oh, right, yeah, that's a good one.
but yeah, it's traveling around the world. This feature kind of came about because every time I've ever been anywhere abroad or whatever, I've always either bumped into someone who knows me from Sheffield or seen something from Sheffield. So we're just going to go straight out of Sheffield.
Nah, wait, aren't you straight out of Sheffield?
So when I go around the world, I kind of tend to bump into people from Bolton. So I do have some weird stories about kind of the way that my job has kind of impacted on my life. The weirdest kind of coincidence was 2 years ago, unfortunately, I had a really serious accident. I fell off an e-bike, Manor Top. Yeah. Right, and I was doing a story about how great e-bikes were, and then fell off an e-bike and broke my hip and had to have a hip replacement, unfortunately. Wow. I was picked up by an ambulance, taken to Northern General, wheeled into, put on a ward, and then the next morning I was wheeled into the operating theatre, and the surgeon said, "Hi, my name's Mr. Sally. What do you do?" I said, "I'm a journalist." He said, "Oh, you work for?" I said, "Oh, something called the Sheffield Tribune." He says, "Oh, I'm a subscriber." Right. Yeah. So my surgeon was like was somebody who knew my work, which felt a bit weird. So that was kind of a nice coincidence. But I suppose, like I say, yeah, for me, I bump into people from Bolton all the time. But one thing I did think of when you said that I was going to be asked this was there was a nice coincidence in that. Plus 31 years ago now, I actually came to Sheffield to watch Oasis at the Sheffield Arena.
Yeah.
And this was in 1995 when I was 17, and Pulp were supporting them on that day. That was the first time I'd been to Sheffield, and I didn't come back for a long time. And then 30 years later, I was watching them at Tramlines as they did this big homecoming show. And I'm 47, and now I've moved to Sheffield, and I live and work in the city, and I'm writing about this band who Jarvis grew up just up the road from me, and it just felt like a really, really nice coincidence that I had this connection with Sheffield from the mid-90s, and now I've kind of come back, and my life has come a bit full circle. So it's not quite what you asked, but that was as good as I could get.
Yeah, I think that's a great story as well. I think as well, there's a bit of luck in that as well, because if I remember rightly, Pulp weren't supposed to be supporting that night.
They weren't. I can't remember who it was.
Stone Roses.
Oh, was it the Stone Roses? Right. Okay.
And literally just at the last minute they were drafted in because because of illness or something.
Yeah. So and now you say to people, "I watched Oasis supported by Pulp," and they'll be very jealous because seeing those bands in 1995 at the heart of the Powers, and 2 months later I saw Pulp at Glastonbury, and that was the same time they released Common People, and that was the moment that Pulp became like a huge thing.
Yeah.
And it's such a great story because they've been going since like 1979, never really got anywhere, and then all of a sudden in the mid-90s they become one of the biggest bands in Britain. It's such a brilliant story.
It is, and poster boys for tenacity, really, isn't it?
Yeah, definitely.
But just I think Pulp around like the mid to late 90s, they were almost the substitutes in some respects. I think there was a headliner at Glastonbury that pulled out at the last minute. And
I think that was the Stone Roses. That was the night I saw them. Yeah.
So it's amazing. I absolutely love Pulp.
I really wanted to interview Nick Banks a while ago. The drummer. And I read some of his book, and he starts with them playing Glastonbury that night and saying he was talking about how nervous they all were before they went out headlining Glastonbury. And I was in the crowd, so my idea for the piece was to kind of talk about the weird idea that I was in the crowd watching them, thinking they were these gods, and he was backstage absolutely terrified.
Going back to the Tribune, vindicated again with the fact that it's award-winning in some respects. I think, Molly was at the Mill, wasn't she, when she got her award?
So Molly kind of joined us last year. She previously worked at our title in Manchester, and she won a British Journalism Award for work that she'd done in Manchester. So we currently have an award-winning journalist, but we've also just been nominated for another award, which is called the Private Eye's Paul Foot Award, which is probably the most prestigious award in investigative journalism in the UK. Last week we found out we'd made the shortlist for that of 6 other us and 5 other stories, and we'll find out how we've done on the 1st of June, where we've all been invited down to London, and we'll find out. I mean, I don't think we'll win, but just to be nominated is fantastic. And
that one was for the Andrew Milne investigation, wasn't it? The nomination, which we can't necessarily go into in depth because of the circumstances around the legal proceedings that might be happening there. But generally, how do you think people took to that story, and why did that story resonate with so many?
I think the way it kind of came to us was interesting because my colleague Daniel, his wife is a GP, and she's in a WhatsApp group called Medic Mums or something like that. Right. And there were a few people just started saying, "Has anyone received any letters from this solicitor?" And enough of them came in on this WhatsApp group. She started to think, maybe there's something here. She told Daniel, her husband, my colleague, and we just started looking into it. And it turned out that there was this entire story that we can't really go into too much detail about, but this solicitor had been sending lots of letters out to people who are leaseholders in Sheffield. Now, I mean, I don't really understand the difference between, or I didn't understand the difference between leasehold and freehold. So if somebody owns your freehold, they own the land which your house is on. So you can own a house, but you can actually, where somebody else can own the land. And he was saying to householders that they owed him lots of money because they'd made changes to their houses. Yeah, I mean, we spent a long time investigating it. We were about to publish when we got some legal threats. We delayed our publishing. So we carried on investigating for another couple of weeks and eventually published it. And yeah, it's been one of the most successful and impactful stories we've ever had. You know, a lot of people in Sheffield knew us, but we maybe hadn't broken through into kind of wider consciousness, and that story really did. The fact that we'd kind of followed this story through and kind of stood up to kind of legal threats and kind of stuck to our guns kind of put us into an entire different kind of echelon for kind of people's awareness. And yeah, over the last 6 months, we've done a lot of stories on that piece, and we're hoping that's kind of proven to people that we can do really, really good, impactful investigative work.
Yeah, and it was an investigation as well. There was a couple of road trips involved in that one, wasn't it?
Yeah, it wasn't me who made them, but my colleague Daniel went to the Wirral and North Wales. He spent a lot of time in Bradway, knocking on people's doors in the pouring rain in October, knocking on people's doors and people, you know, telling them about the story and them going, "What are you talking about?" And then one of the final times, I must have knocked on about 40 people's doors. And then I was about to go home, get the bus back into the city centre, and I knocked on a final door, and this woman opened the door. I told her why I was there, and she said, "Come in." And she had the full story. A lot of journalism now is done contacting people on Facebook or LinkedIn or Twitter or whatever, but there's still space in journalism for walking around their estate in Sheffield, knocking on people's doors in the driving rain and finding a story. And that's what journalism always used to be, and it's great that that still has a role to play.
It again goes to speak to giving people the time to chase the story, doesn't it?
Yeah.
I think one of the most impactful pieces of that was on the day that he was arrested. You released a story with one of the people that had received this letter, and she finally came forward and actually named herself.
Yeah, well, that was the person who I knocked on the door of in Bradway. Yeah. At the beginning, she didn't want to name herself, but because she was still worried about possibly, you know, at the time she wasn't in possession of her freehold, so she was worried that if she kind of went public that it might come back on her. But she eventually was happy to go on the record, and I mean she's kind of been through the mill when it comes to that story. So hopefully one day that she'll get justice.
Yeah. That's a challenge, isn't it, getting people to go on the record? People are brave for doing so, aren't they? Is that something you've seen, that people are now trusting you more to actually reveal themselves, so to speak, and tell their story?
Yeah, I think it depends on the story. You know, we still have to. We'd rather get people on the record, but we still have to acknowledge that some people want to remain anonymous, especially. We've done stories about certain businesses in Sheffield, some hospitality businesses, for example, who weren't treating their staff particularly well. And some people are still wary, you know, if they put their names forward, they might not get another job, which you have to respect, you have to understand. But yeah, people are more willing to speak to us now. And one of the things, when we first started the Tribune, we didn't really get people sending us tips a lot. You know, we asked for tips all the time, but it took a while for people to kind of understand that we could be trusted to investigate stories. We get tips all the time now.
Yeah.
Too many, probably. They're actually kind of quite difficult to kind of cope with, the sheer amount. But yeah, we do get a lot of tips, and it's great because it means that we're a team of 4 people, but the amount of people out there listening for things that might be interesting for us is thousands strong, you know, and it's brilliant. And if you can have a relationship with your readers where they trust you, they can become part of the team. In fact, they are really, as members, they fund it. You know, they're part of the Tribune, and they can contribute to stories as well.
How do you get your story? Is it mainly through tips and then you speak to the people giving you tips, or?
Yeah, some of it comes through tips. An increasing amount does come through tips. But, you know, typical, you know, we go on things like social media. Like I particularly like Reddit as a source because people like talking about things on Reddit. And certain people might put things about little kind of tips about, you know, some gossip that's happening in Sheffield. And obviously gossip is gossip, so you can't treat it as like gospel truth, but they're interesting tidbits and we can then go and investigate and see that there's any truth to them. So social media is we don't want to rely on it too much, but it is a good source. Some of those local Facebook groups are good as well.
Yeah.
I mean, we did a story a while ago about something going off in Ecclesall, about a family that had moved in and who were there was lots of trouble being caused by this family, and that came from the S11 Facebook group. So social media is a good source of stories. Tips is as well, but sometimes you kind of we're just something that we're interested in as well. I like doing stories about bits of Sheffield that are kind of underreported. So I like doing stories about things like, say, Gleadless Valley, or bits of Eastern. I did one a while ago, Stradbroke or Low Edges and things like that. These places that don't really get coverage unless there's been something that's happened there, like a stabbing or a murder or we want to kind of. We don't want to gloss over the fact that these places can be quite tough places to live, but they're not just bad places to live. There's lots of stuff going on around there. And if you can delve into it a bit more, you can find out what's really going on and you can paint a fuller picture of it. So I tend to trust my instincts in terms of I like to get out to places that I know that are underreported and try and kind of paint them as the kind of nuanced and interesting places rather than these kind of no-go areas.
There's an interesting thing, I think, where a lot of the perceived bad places, so to speak, are the places that have the tightest communities. And there's lots of really interesting stories to delve into there. I find that, with Sheffield Forum as well, we have a lot of people that, just talk about what's going on in their area. And to some people, if that was a quick Facebook post, people would scroll past it. But because Sheffield Forum's like long-form conversation, so to speak, long-form social media. Doing similar in social media to what you're doing against the short-form news. But I think it's important to highlight those stories. That's something that you have the opportunity to do as well because you have the time and resource to do so. So I find that really interesting. And you speak to your members being part of the team, which brings us on to your 5th birthday as the Tribune. And over this period, you've kind of taken the opportunity to introduce yourselves a bit more to supporters and to try and grow your supporters as well.
So we thought we'd been around for 5 years like now. And to be honest, I don't know where that 5 years has gone. It feels like it's gone by in the kind of blink of an eye since I set it up in 2021. But we thought kind of now we're more established in Sheffield with certain stories like the Andrew Milne story kind of putting us on getting us known by a few more people. We thought we'd kind of take the 5th birthday as an opportunity to kind of re-announce ourselves in Sheffield and do this campaign. Basically, what we want to do is, now we're a bit more established, we want to give something kind of back to the city and a bit of a thank you for kind of supporting us over the last 5 years. And so what we're trying to do is we've set out 5 pledges that we are going to fulfill, or we hope to fulfill over the next year. But in order to do that, we'll need a bit more support from Sheffield. So what we hope to do is, if we get 1,000 more members in the next month, we will fulfill these 5 pledges. And the 5 pledges are, the first is tackle misinformation in amongst young people in Sheffield. Sorry, I'm going to forget the 5 now.
I've got it written down.
Well, go on.
Fortunately, the second one is nurture local talent.
Nurture local talent, which is really good. We've got 2 brilliant journalism departments at University of Sheffield and Sheffield Hallam. We'd like to use writers from those places and from any background in order to kind of get more people writing for us.
Third one, shine a light on the good stuff.
This is mine. So mine is this, we've talked about this already, but I really want to celebrate all the good stuff that's happening in Sheffield, and there is so much good stuff. So we're going to have like a monthly good news edition.
Brilliant. And exploring Sheffield's inequalities.
Again, another thing that's kind of a bit of a hobby horse of mine is when you first come to Sheffield, you realise how divided it is between East and West. The West is generally kind of better off and the East is more deprived. I live at Park Hill, so I live right in the centre. So anything kind of east of me, kind of going towards the Manor, kind of northeast Sheffield is, the people there have There's no less talent over there, but there's less opportunity. So we'd like to kind of expose and talk about those inequalities a bit more.
Yeah, and then the fifth one is engage citizens with local democracy.
Yeah. So we're going to do a monthly local democracy edition by covering everything that's going on in the town hall and in the combined authority, and we're going to make that free to read for everybody.
You're kind of stating that that's on the proviso of getting 1,000 extra members, new members, in the campaign month.
Yeah.
What led you to the target of 1,000?
It's kind of a big round number, I suppose, isn't it? But we just this is a campaign where our Manchester sister title had done something similar recently, and that's the target they set themselves. When we were thinking about a target, I was thinking, well, Sheffield's a bit smaller than Manchester. Maybe we should go for a lower target. And we thought, no, there's no reason why Sheffield should set its sights lower than Manchester. So we decided to go for the same number. So we're counting on Sheffield to at least match and hopefully beat Manchester.
Yeah, so you're throwing down the gauntlet.
To Manchester.
That Yorkshire Rose against the Lancashire.
Exactly, yeah. I've got a foot in both camps, obviously, being a Lancastrian, but yeah, we'll gloss over that.
What's the risk if you don't get that 1,000? Do you not do these things, or do you do a slimmed down version, or you carry on doing what you're doing?
I suppose if we don't, then yeah, there is that kind of chance. There is that possibility that we won't we won't be able to do the pledges, because the pledges they will take work from us. They will take extra work in terms of we'll need to devote time to doing a good news edition, to doing a local democracy edition, to nurturing young writers, and to going out to schools and tackling disinformation in schools. So if we don't get the 1,000 extra members, we might not be able to do some of those things. So yeah, we're hopeful and we're confident that we can get the 1,000, but it will depend on people to getting involved in the campaign. And one of the things we are doing to kind of push the campaign is we're doing a very first print edition.
Is that something you might have an ambition to do in the future as a regular thing or a semi-regular thing?
I think we'd like to do it as a semi-regular thing. And we know that just the amount of work that's gone into doing this is quite a lot of work, because we're geared up to send newsletters out via email. We're not geared up to do print edition. You've got to kind of, the whole logistical part of it is quite kind of a bit mad, really. But I know as a journalist that seeing your name in print, there's just something really, really nice about it. There's something nice to see in your byline in print. And it feels like it's a bit more real when you see an actual physical copy. So it would be something would be nice to do more regularly, but it might be something that we do on maybe an annual basis, although I don't want to commit too much to that. But yeah, it would be great to do it on a regular basis, because we know that people like reading things in a physical form. People like to, especially increasingly these days, they like to get away from their phones and actually read a book or a newspaper. So yeah, it would be nice to tap into that a bit.
It's a great ambition to have. What going forward, beyond kind of this campaign period, does that extra 1,000 members give to you? Does that equal another member of staff maybe down the line? Yeah,
possibly. Yeah. I mean, I think we managed to hire Molly last year. We kind of poached her from Manchester, if you like. But when we got to 3,000 members, so we set ourselves a target of getting from 2,000 to 3,000. And we always said that once we get to 3,000, we can hire another member of staff. And that 2,000 to 3,000 took us a long time. It took us 2 years. It is. We are kind of trying to build something from the bottom up is difficult, and we are always waiting for the moment we can have enough money coming in that we can afford to hire a new member of staff. So yeah, if we continue to grow, then yeah, the idea is that we employ more staff over time. I suppose we've got 3 and a bit now. It would be nice to get to say half a dozen in the next few years, but I don't think we want to set a limit on it. I think if we can get to if we can carry on growing and more people subscribe, there's no reason why we can't over the long term have, say, maybe 10 or 12. But that's something for quite a few years down the line yet.
Yeah, it's those steps, isn't it, to get to where you want to. And I think you mentioned earlier before we were recording that the ambition kind of like after this stage is to get to 1% of the Sheffield City region population.
Yeah. I mean, Sheffield has 600,000 people, so 1% would be 6,000.
Yeah,
that seems like a goal, but we're only on 3,200 at the moment, so that's kind of that would be double what we are at the moment. So we're still a long way off that, but yeah, that's what we'd like to do over the long term.
Yeah, you say only, but I think that's a decent amount. I think that's a very good start, and I think it shows to what the Tribune is and what it means to people, that people will pay money to subscribe.
Yeah, I mean, when we opened up our subscription service there was the 7th of July, or the 6th or the 7th of July 2021. I genuinely didn't know whether anyone would subscribe. And the first few that came in, I was running around my flat at Park Hill. It was amazing. And then the first target was 700. That we thought if we can get to 700, that is sustainable. We can make a go of it. And it took us a while to get there. It took us like 6 months to get to 700, and then getting to 1,000 and getting to 1,500 and 2,000 and then 3,000. You know what I mean? Each one of these milestones takes a hell of a lot of work. Anything that's valuable, anything that's worth doing is going to be hard work, and it's been really hard work, but really rewarding.
Yeah, and I think hitting those milestones should be celebrated.
Yeah.
Definitely.
Yeah.
I used to work in a startup, and someone in a team would get a sale. They'd ring a bell and then run to the pub. Everyone would run to the pub and celebrate, and that's just one sale for that startup at that time.
I've done that several times. Yeah, unfortunately, Sheffield's full of great pubs, which we might get onto in a minute.
Yeah, absolutely. So that brings us on nicely to our final feature, curating your personal list of the best of Sheffield.
Ray, good recommendations.
So there's 5 simple questions, and it's just what do you like and why. So the first one is your best pub or cafe in Sheffield.
Yeah, well, I'm going to go for pub. It won't surprise you to know. We moved into Leah's Yard 2 years ago now, in 2024, and directly underneath our office is a pub and bottle shop called Hop Hideout, which is run by a woman called Jules Gray, who she's been around in the Sheffield beer scene for a long time, 10, maybe 12 years or something like that. And she's an incredibly nice person, and she's incredibly knowledgeable about beer. And Hop Hideout is just on our go-to place for every Friday and quite a lot of days after work. We just kind of decamp there. They sell fantastic beer. It's a tiny little place, but it's kind of ours, and I love spending time in there and speaking to Jules and drinking all the fantastic beers from all over the country he gets in there. So that's my favourite pub,
Yeah, I'd love it as well. And Leah's Yard is like a little community in itself, isn't it? You've obviously got the office in there, but I think there's quite a nice little independent bond that's happening throughout that place.
Yeah, it's great. I mean, we kind of know some of the people quite well. I mean, Alex, who runs the bookshop, La Biblioteca. I think my mum once came to Leah's Yard and she said that La Biblioteca is her favourite bookshop in the world. I'm less of a wine person, but obviously lots of people love Barks. I think good wine is probably a bit unwasted on me, but lots of people love it. And it's people love going into Charlie's shop and tasting all the fantastic wines he gets in. So it's a great place, and we're very, very lucky to live there. I live there. I feel like I live there. To work there. I live at Park Hill and I work at Leah's Yard, so it turns out that I both live and work in Grade 2 star listed buildings, so I'm kind of greedy.
And of course, the Park Hill have got the Pearl, haven't they? Is that somewhere is that your local, so to speak? Or?
Yeah, I mean, I like that. The Sheffield Tap is obviously a great place as well, and I always quite like the old Queen's Head as well, because it's just such a fantastic old building, and it's kind of one of the oldest buildings in Sheffield, so I quite like it there as well.
Next question is, what's your favourite place to eat?
Yeah, I'm not much of a foodie, but I particularly like, there's an Indian restaurant called Five Tara.
Yeah.
They've got a few different sites now. So they've got one on Duke Street, which is right opposite Park Hill. But their main site now is down on Shalesmoor. And I did a story about them, when was it? Maybe 3-4 years ago. And the people who run it are fantastic. The guy came over to England and he was trying out different Indian restaurants, and he was a bit like, he was a bit disappointed about how kind of unauthentic they were. So he tries to make their Indian food really authentic. I think he told me that if you were baking butter chicken like they do in this country, you'd get deported if you were in India. Right. So he was like, his thing is kind of making things as authentic as possible. And they do fantastic food. And I really love Indian street food. So they do things like, I don't know if you've ever heard of them, called Vada Pav, which is like a potato burger, a potato patty in like a burger bun, served with, it's like really, really lots of lovely spices in it, served with fried green chilies. And the chef, Anthony Bourdain, said it was his favourite food in the world. And I agree with Anthony Bourdain. I could eat them forever, I think.
I did a quick listicle of restaurants that I liked in Sheffield.
Yeah.
and I missed off 5 Toro.
Okay.
And people told me.
People told you.
People told me. Yeah. So what's your favourite independent shop in Sheffield?
Mine's a bit of a kind of a curveball, I suppose. But one of the shops I really, really like is it's a place called Shaw's Ironmongers.
Oh, right, yeah.
Have you ever been there?
I've been past,
Okay.
but not been in.
Right. It's near Bramall Lane. I think it's on Duchess Road, just off Queen's Road, I think that is. And it's just an amazing place. It's the kind of place that just doesn't exist anymore. You'll go to like B&Q and, you know, I don't want to slag off B&Q, but, it takes you like hours to find anything. Whereas if you go to Shaw's, you'll ask them behind the counter and they'll just rummage in the back and they'll find you the exact thing that you need. When I was looking for something once, somebody told me that if it's not in Shaw's, it doesn't exist. You know what I mean? They literally have everything. And it's just, when I was growing up in Bolton, there was loads of places like that. And they're just the kind of places that don't exist anymore. And I love the fact that some of them do. And I hope that it carries on existing because it's just such a fantastic little place.
Yeah, my granddad had a chip shop in Darnell as I was growing up. A few doors down from there was what sounds like a similar place. It was like an old hardware
shop.
Yeah. And you'd walk in and it was like all the cardboard boxes of lots
Everything,
of different...
lots of...
and you're right, you could go in there and you'd find anything.
Yeah. And it's one of the places, people in those places are so knowledgeable. Like I say, I don't want to slag off B&Q, but the staff who work in B&Q aren't anywhere going to be anywhere near as knowledgeable. That knowledge, they've been able to tap into that knowledge is great, and that's kind of what we're losing, I think.
Yeah, and then following on from that, what's your favourite thing to do in Sheffield?
Yeah, I think I'm going to stick to something kind of very obvious and kind of getting out into Western Sheffield and going out into the kind of the Peak District, or not just the Peak District, the way the Peak District comes into Sheffield. So last year we had a team day, so all of our titles around the country came to Sheffield. We got a buzz up to the top of the Riverline Valley. We walked down it, all 25 journalists, which, journalists, they tend to spend their time kind of tapping behind a keyboard. So getting out into nature is quite a rare occurrence. So we all walked down the Riverline Valley and it was just such a glorious day. And it was just like all these people, all these journalists from all over the country were like, wow, this is incredible. We can't get my head around how beautiful this is. And Sheffield is full of places like that. I went up to Blackamoor to interview, Tom Hunt once, and it was you could see it was like a freezing cold day, and you could see for miles, and it was like that is just like so unique. Other cities don't have that. Manchester's not far from the Peak District, but Sheffield overlaps it.
Yeah,
you know what I mean. You actually couldn't be in Sheffield and in the Peak District at the same time, and it's just so unique. And any chance I get, I try and get out to those places.
Blackamoor's a great one because it's quite close to Dorset. You can just walk like literally minutes and you're in the Peak District.
Yeah.
But also the actual nature that's there is amazing. There's lots of deer that just walk around there.
Yeah.
It's like just a couple of miles from Dorset.
It's incredible. Yeah. I mean, from my flat at Park Hill, it takes me 20 minutes to drive over. But there's some people, very lucky people, who live on the west of Sheffield. It probably takes 5 minutes to drive there.
Yeah, it's amazing. I love it. Do you have a favourite kind of nature reserve or place to go, or?
Yeah, I suppose my kind of go-to is just somewhere pretty obvious, like Stanage Edge or somewhere like that. You feel like it is literally 20 minutes from where I live and in the car, and you can feel like you're in the middle of nowhere. It's fantastic.
Yeah, it's one of the benefits I had working at Wildlife Trust. They obviously look after 15 nature reserves.
Right. Yeah.
And being able to just hop in a car with somebody and go with a ranger to a nature reserve is amazing.
Yeah.
I didn't do it enough, really. That's a good call for people to support the Wildlife Trust because they do look after these places on a shoestring, really, and volunteer-led. Yeah. Really important to support places like that.
I think we've done lots of stories with the Wildlife Trust. David Bocking, who I mentioned earlier, does work with them all the time, and people really love those stories. And Sheffielders love the fact that they live in such close proximity to such a beautiful place. And
then the final one for Rate Good recommendations is what would you class as your Sheffield hidden gem?
Okay, so it's another place to eat actually, but for the last
you said you weren't a foodie.
No, I'm not much of a foodie. This is the thing; it's kind of street food, but For the last 6 years or longer now, I've been going to a place in Orchard Square called Burritos y Mas.
Oh, yes.
Have you ever been there?
Yeah.
Okay.
Great. I love a burrito.
And it's run by a guy called Hector Hernandez, who I've known now for like 6 years. Occasionally we go out for a drink together, and he is from Colombia, and he set up Burritos y Mas just before the pandemic. And the pandemic was obviously really, really difficult for them, for all kind of places like that. And he kind of really, really struggled to keep it going. And I went every single week trying to do my bit to keep it going. And he's managed to keep it going, and it's a really successful business. They serve fantastic burritos. They're fantastic. If anyone hasn't tried them already, I would recommend them. But not only that, he's just such a nice guy, and a lot of businesses like that, they're kind of run by the personality of the people who run them. Yeah, he always speaks to all his customers, and it's just a nice place to go and get something to eat and have a chat with Hector. And yeah, it's a fantastic place. Whether it counts as hidden because he's always got a queue kind of running out of the door, but lots of people might not know it exists, and I would recommend it. So that was my hidden gem.
You're kind of quite well placed for a lot of these questions because you live at Park Hill near the city centre. You work in Lear's Yard, which has a plethora, a lot of really good local, small, local independent places.
Yeah. I mean, it is what Sheffield is known for, isn't it? Again, it's a bit of a cliche, but we kind of, maybe what we lack in kind of big chains, and people might moan we don't have Harvey Nichols and John Lewis anymore and things like that, but we've got a fantastic amount of independent businesses, and that's what people really value in Sheffield. And hopefully, it's a difficult time for all businesses at the moment, but hopefully most of them will survive.
Yeah, great. And so just to close off, you finish a lot of your Tribune editions, newsletters with a call to action. Is there anything you'd like to say to people to encourage them to join as a member and join this drive to an extra 1,000 members?
Yeah, I mean, I just like to, I suppose I don't want to say like become a member but just kind of check it out. If you've not come across the Tribune before, just go to our website and read some of the stories there. And we think that what we're offering is something really positive, something that's really useful for Sheffield. And that is why we offer, we send out 2 free stories every week. And we say, if you like the free stuff, then maybe become a member if you want to. There's never going to be anything compelling you to become a paid member. You can stay on the free list for as long as you want. But we think that what we are offering is something that's useful and a lot of people like, and they want to become paid members and supporters. So just check it out. And if you're already a member or if you're already a subscriber, tell as many of your friends as possible. And because one of the things that's been really, really valuable to us over the last 5 years is just spreading by word of mouth. And friends and family members telling other people they know that the Tribune is worth reading and worth supporting. And just check us out, really. So for the next month, for our campaign, you can pay whatever you want. So you can pay the full price or half price, or you can pay nothing if you want to, because I suppose one of the things is we need to get money in to support our work, but we don't want to stop people accessing it. And if say for example, they don't have very much money. So we're offering people can become members for the next month and they don't have to pay anything. So they can take that up if they want to. And hopefully they like it and they're prepared to give us a bit of money.
Yeah, I think that's a good opportunity, isn't it? It's almost like a free trial or support to whatever level you maybe can do as and see what it's like. Yeah. And just
we know that a lot of people, it's a difficult time at the moment, and 90 quid a year or £9 a month is it will eat into people's money. So we're conscious that we don't want to price people out.
Yeah, great. Well, it's been a really interesting conversation, and it's great to get behind the Tribune and what it's about and what you're about. And I think it will become a Sheffield institution. I think it's very important for our city, and it's a valuable piece of media. So thank you very much for that.
Yeah, thanks for your kind
words. Thank you for coming in.
Okay, no, thanks for having me. It's been really good. Thanks very much.
Wow, what a conversation. That was Dan Hayes of the Sheffield Tribune. Thanks so much, Dan, for coming on. And thank you for listening. If you've enjoyed this episode, please subscribe to REYT wherever you get your podcasts. It's completely free, and it's the best way to make sure you never miss a conversation. And also, wherever you get your podcasts, please drop a review. A nice 5-star review really helps us get seen in the algorithm of these things. I'll not go into it. It's just complex and confusing. REYT is the independent Sheffield podcast powered by Sheffield Forum at sheffieldforum.co.uk for everything Sheffield. We'll see you next time. Thanks for listening.